I'm Julie Bartkey with this Senate update. We caught up with Senate leadership to get a preview of Thursday night's State of the State address from the governor, and some of the key points that the leaders expect the governor to emphasize include growth in the economy, Minnesota's commitment to funding education and closing the academic achievement gap. They also expect the governor to push for increasing the gas tax to help fund transportation projects. So here are Senate Majority Leader Tom Bakk and Minority Leader David Hann.
Well, I think to some extent it's a snapshot back over the governor's first 5 years in office, and I think the question he's likely to ask is, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And I think most Minnesotans feel better about where their personal family situation is right now than they did before Governor Dayton took office. And I think that's what he should be measured against, is what kind of job is he being the steward of our state.
Let's talk a little bit about what the governor is advocating for. Fully funded pre-K, the gas tax, a bonding bill. The House isn't on board with any of these. The Senate is to some extent. So what does it mean for you in the Senate to try to create a situation where this session can end and end on time?
Well, we're just really starting to get engaged now. I mean, today was our first day where we're going to focus just on the budget, not on policy considerations. So we'll start putting the finance bills together in the Senate. There are 7 bills that are considered our omnibus spending bills that fund K-12 and higher education, transportation and healthcare, economic development. And we'll start assembling them. Expect to have them off the floor of the Senate before the 1st of May. And into conference with the House, and at that point then, that last week of April, first few days of May, the Speaker and I will get together and start to work on kind of a joint target for those different spending bills to consider.
Mr. Majority Leader, I'd like to get your thoughts on this tweet that came today from Dr. Larry Jacobs of the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs. He tweeted, "What Dayton must do in the State of the State on Thursday, set feasible agenda to finish session. If he fails, Senator Bakk gains the upper hand to make the deals." What are your thoughts?
Well, you know, governors propose a budget, and then after the February forecast, they propose a supplemental budget. And then governors actually, in my experience, is kind of step back and let the legislature move the budget bills through the process. It's the legislature where the public gets an opportunity to comment on the legislative budget proposal. Once all of the budget bills are actually in conference committee, then it really is the governor's opportunity to come to the table and say what he will accept and what's an absolute must do, and that generally doesn't happen until everything gets into conference.
And to that point, the Senate budget targets are, generally speaking, in between where the House is and where the governor is. Given that, and given your background as a negotiator, do you kind of consider yourself the key negotiator in trying to get this all done?
Well, I think what the Senate budget targets reflect is they don't reflect a negotiating position. We're just trying to put a very honest budget together on what we think the next state budget should look like. I think the governor and the House should just take the Senate bill and let's finish up early. We've got a very thoughtful proposal that right now people only have the numbers, but as we actually start to put the bills together, I think people will see that the priorities for the Senate are the priorities that most Minnesotans share, including the fact that we're putting an additional $250 million into the budget reserve, because these good economic times won't last indefinitely, and we're going to have to lean back on the reserve to keep the state's budget in balance in the years ahead.
Knowing that you can't really predict the future, but do you think session will end on time?
It'll be done on May 18th, which is the adjournment date in the Constitution.
Well, I expect the governor will certainly continue to make the argument that he's making in his budget over the last couple of years and the budget this year, that the state needs more spending and more taxes, and that somehow that's responsible for a marginal economy. We're not buying that argument. We think that there has to be more scrutiny about the taxation plans the governor has advocated and continues to defend, the increase in the wholesale gas tax, for example. And I think there has to be focus and questions about the spending. Too much of that spending seems to us to not be directed at solving problems, but it's kind of self-serving. It's kind of directed at rewarding political allies of the governor and the DFL, and they're not really focused on how to solve the problems the state faces.
Senator, the Senate appears to be kind of in the middle from where the House is and the governor is. Where do you see your role as the minority leader in trying to facilitate, first of all, an end of session?
Well, I'm not so sure if I would buy that the Senate is in the middle. I think that the Senate is probably much closer to the governor.
How about somewhere in between? Would that be a better phrase?
Somewhere in between. I think that's fair. I think that there's going to be differences between the governor's budget and the Senate budget, but I think on the major issues there's going to be agreement. I think they all agree on a gas tax, some form of that. Maybe not the details, but some form of it. I think they're all in agreement that they need to spend more money. So there are those things. I think our job as a minority is to try to be as helpful as we can to our Republican friends in the House and try to help them make the argument for the kind of budget approach that they're going to take, even though I have not yet seen their bill yet. I'm sure we will shortly. And I think, too, with respect to bonding, I heard that the governor today has announced a large bonding bill. They will need our votes for that. That's something we're very skeptical about giving.
Finally, Senator, Dr. Larry Jacobs of the Humphrey Institute of Public Affairs just tweeted, what Governor Dayton must do in the State of the State on Thursday is set a feasible agenda to finish this session. Is that possible? It just seems so polar.
Well, I don't know. I think the governor has made comments that suggest he doesn't really think he needs to do that. He's talked about being completely sort of free to be whoever he wants to be. I think he has some pretty well-known and well-publicized commitments to do certain things. He wants to raise a gas tax. He thinks that's the only way to solve the problem. We on the Republican side think there is a problem there, but that's not the only solution, and we think we have a better one. So I don't know that he's going to be making conciliatory compromise gestures in the budget speech or the State of the State speech. I think he wants to advocate for his perspective and leave the negotiation for later.
Dr. Jacobs did also say that if the governor fails at this, Senator Bakk gains the upper hand to making the deal. So do you think it's that the Senate does have a lot of power here in trying to broker an ending?
I think the Senate has some power, but I think the governor is and it's the way our system works. I think any governor really has at least half of the power in this three-part system. The governor does have a lot of ability to get what he wants at the end of the day. I think that the Senate majority is going to be a partner with the governor. There may be some nuances of that are going to be negotiated. I think, frankly, Senator Bakk is going to be paying attention to the next election cycle where the governor is not, so that may be a moderating influence.